For Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser here with Paul Letlow, longtime sports writer in Louisiana and up in the Northeast corner of the state, where he now is an online columnist for ULMWarhawks.com, former president of the LSWA, a guy that's seen a lot of football, certainly in Louisiana through the years, and saw a great one up in Monroe on Saturday night as the Warhawks come back and beat Army 17-13 to open the season. Paul, what's going on, man? We'll get into some of that Saturday stuff and outlook for the Warhawks now moving forward. But how are you doing? How's life treating you up in Monroe?
Man, I'm doing well. Like you, I'm a Gannett survivor and escapee. So anytime you can wake up and you're no longer employed by those guys, that's a plus. And that's on the record. Absolutely.
There you go. I mentioned it was a good day for folks up there, ULM fans, on Saturday. It didn't necessarily feel like that for a while. It was kind of a crazy night. I know there were some electrical issues, no scoreboard for a while there. And then suddenly the Warhawks, not so suddenly, the Warhawks are down 13-3. But in a span of 3 minutes, touchdown, takeaway, touchdown, and really rewrites the night. Talk me through that flurry late and just what you're seeing unfold, what you're thinking as it all shakes out.
Well, first of all, if you've covered a lot of football games like I know you have too, there's always that point where you start to write your story, or at least formulate it in your brain. And so I felt like I had the story wrapped up already until about that last 6 minutes. And then this flurry of plays happens that completely changes the outcome. Most notably, just to kind of kick things off, they didn't make a quarterback change. They were going to go to a new quarterback this year. They had a backup they liked, but seemed very committed to Jai Wright as their starting quarterback. But he struggled in those first 3 quarters, and so Coach Bowden decided to make a change. Let's try the other guy. Let's just see if we can get a spark. Quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame. We all know that. But in this case, things worked out for the better. But before we even get into the offense, the defense, this is a stat that blew me away. Last year, entire season, 8 takeaways. 8. This ball game, 5. That's pretty significant change, and I think it reflects a roster reshaping that they underwent in the offseason. Like everybody now, they're turning over the roster. They have almost 50 new players, but they added a lot of speed, and speed means you get to the ball quicker. You're there, when the action's happening, and that's where you strip balls loose. You get fumble recoveries, and that was a big play in that fourth quarter for sure, a fumble recovery. But I have to kind of think back because, like I said, my story was written. I almost had two parallel universes going on in this ball game because in one, ULM comes out and just lays an egg, but in the reality, they turned it around, and I don't think anybody saw this coming, especially the way they played for 3 quarters. But it started with a punt, believe it or not. Started with a punt. There was a punt about midway through the fourth quarter that felt like a white flag. It just felt like, okay, you're down 10. You need the ball to score in most cases, and they punted. But the punter was having a pretty good night, and he pins them down near the 3 or 4 yard line. The defense held. It held 3 and out on the last 4 possessions. That was a big key stat as this game progressed. They hold. They get the ball back. One play in, a running back that didn't have a lot of touches in this game, Hunter Smith, goes 62 yards for a touchdown. So that's a first down touchdown. Just took a few seconds. Kid hit 21 miles per hour. That's how fast he was moving. Pretty impressive. You can see that one on Twitter, I think. So you get the touchdown. Now you've kind of made the game interesting, but you still need the ball back. Well, got him. Carlin Vickers strips it loose. He's been doing that all through camp. Been showing has a knack for forcing turnovers and coming up with loose balls, and there he goes again. He gets it. So this new quarterback comes in, a kid that played locally at Ouachita Christian, Hunter Herring, gets them down, thanks to another big run by a different running back, Isaiah Woolard, who they picked up as a portal transfer from Ole Miss. He's the all-time leading rusher in Mississippi as a high school guy. So that's pretty good credentials coming in too. One of those new guys they added. Gets them down in scoring position. Herring hits Tyrone Howell for a one-handed touchdown catch at the boundary, and all of a sudden they're ahead. It's like everybody's, where did this come from? You know, this was not the same game we were watching for the last 3.5 quarters. But and then that defense held one last time. I mean, kept them from coming back, and that was it. I mean, it just happened within that about a 6-minute period, less than 6 minutes, and that whole game turned around. And I know Army was feeling pretty sick headed back to West Point.
Yeah, no doubt. When you're that close and let it slip away. And for ULM, there have been some really nice moments. It's, there have been ups and downs, to say the least, under Coach Bowden, but you beat Liberty a couple years ago, beat the Cajuns, get back on the right side of that cross-state rivalry last year, played with LSU. It didn't work out the same way, but a couple years ago played with LSU, and I think made some LSU fans sweat for a little bit there. Where does what you saw play out Saturday night kind of rank up along moments and, just bolts of excitement around the program in the last 3 years, or if you want to take it beyond that as well?
I think you put it in context of what it could mean. It could be the start of a season that ends maybe with a postseason opportunity. You have a chance to start the season out doing pretty well. You could go 2-0 if you beat Lamar, which is would be the first time since 2018. But if this is a season that ends up in a bowl game, which would be significant because there's only been one bowl appearance since these guys moved up to FBS in 1994. If this is the start of that, then it really becomes an important win. The odds makers weren't necessarily pulling for ULM in this case. I think they were 10-point, 10, 9, 8-point underdogs going in as a home team. But I kind of felt like they had a pretty good shot to win. And I told people that I thought, I'd seen some good things from these guys in the spring and in camp. And I felt like Army was kind of going through some transitions too. And they might be a little buggy. They may have some things to work out as well. And then coming down to Louisiana this time of year, it doesn't really matter to me that you're a service academy or anybody else. If you're not acclimated to this kind of heat and humidity, that's a different animal too. So I kind of considered that as a 12th man out there for the Warhawks as well. Interestingly enough, I saw more Warhawks cramping up than guys from Army. But like I said, they just got that spark laid and they just kept plugging along. And that's a different trait. That's a trait that may serve them well as this season progresses.
What's the quarterback situation look like now moving forward after Hunter Herring comes in and has that nice finish to the game? What does Coach Bowden had to say about the Jaya and Hunter dynamic now moving forward into the season?
Two things. Hunter Herring, I believe, will start this week, which is not necessarily a surprise, but I do think they feel like they've got to keep Jai Wright engaged, and so I anticipate maybe seeing both those guys play. What the split will be, what the ratio will be, I don't know. And I certainly wouldn't give up on Jai Wright. He's a phenomenal athlete. They did some off-season testing, and just as all-around guys go with strength and agility and 40 time and vertical jump, I mean, he's right up there with anybody on the roster. So hopefully they'll find a good role for him too, because he's waited a long time and has put in his work as well. But Hunter Herring, man, I mean, when he came down for the post-game press conference and you kind of stand beside him. I mean, I'm not a tall guy, but he looks the part, man. He's like 6'4", and he's put together pretty well. And he's an impressive guy that can spin it pretty well. He can move well for a guy that size. And he's just got, both of those quarterbacks have some moxie to him, but it just wasn't Jaya's night that night. And so, like I said, I wouldn't give up on him. And I wouldn't give Hunter all the credit for the comeback. I mean, 2 big runs by running backs and just a phenomenal performance by that defense were really the storylines. But anytime you have a quarterback change, that gets some of the headlines too.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the punter earlier as well. Braxton Gilbo had a hell of a night punting. When I was looking at Louisiana versus all y'all weekly player of the week stuff for special teams, was looking at his numbers and he was certainly heavily in that mix with a couple of other guys. What else do you look now in this Lamar matchup? What are you kind of trying to see from this team or looking for to see as you talk about maybe they have a chance to be a bowl team by the end of the season? What do you want to see from them building off of this Army game, areas of the game, whether that be just showing a level of consistency with something, or some things that they do need to clean up potentially offensively that make you feel more encouraged in their quest toward that goal?
Sure. A lot of drops by receivers. I don't have a number, but just kind of thinking back, I mean, there were some drives short circuited by guys just not reeling in those catches, and that seemed like it affected Jai a little bit too. You know, he needed some confidence early, and when you get those drops, it it probably makes you question some things too. But anyway, they need to start hauling in some passes and finding some guys beyond Tyrone Howell that can be consistent playmakers in the passing game. I'd like to see a little more commitment to the run. I think they, seeing them hit on those big plays with some of those backs. Interestingly enough, they made a concerted effort to get bigger backs, bigger running backs that ran with a little more thump in the offseason, and they end up with a guy like Hunter Smith that kind of just kept emerging, just kept showing what he could do all through the spring and the preseason, and he's built more like the backs that they had last year, but he's a north-south guy too. He's a smallish back, but he runs with a little more authority than you would expect out of a smaller guy. And when he gets in the open field, again, 21 miles per hour on that touchdown run, he's got those wheels too. So that's impressive. And of course, defensively, I think this is a defense that's going to hang its hat on forcing turnovers. It's going to be a fast defense. It's probably going to have a harder time lining up and just stopping somebody. It doesn't have maybe the bulk that you need, but some guys that tackle well, and you're always going to see 3 or 4 men around that ball. And so when that happens, that's when you get those forced fumbles, and that's when you end up, making plays that turn around ball games.
Good deal. Paul, appreciate you, man, taking some time and reflecting on some of that.
One more thing I want to mention, because
Absolutely.
as you said, I've been doing this a long time. A first for me. So you mentioned the electricity going out and the scoreboard out. I was able to find out what happened there, and it's a pretty interesting thing. Last week was rush week at ULM. Sorority.
Okay.
Brats, right? Okay. There was one of the sororities on campus. They had a balloon release. When Mylar balloons hit transformers, that's not a good situation. That messes up football. So, yeah, that's what happened. A sorority balloon hits a transformer minutes before the game starts, knocks everything out. They were talking about playing on Sunday. They started early to try to use what daylight was left, not knowing if they get the lights back on and the scoreboard operational. But fortunately, there was someone from Energy in the stadium that was able to put in a call to get an emergency work order and get that thing fixed up. And, midway through the second quarter, everything comes back on. We got the scoreboard back. We got the lights on, and ultimately got a lights out performance by that defense that ended up, parlaying into a win. So it all worked out. I'm not sure anybody scripted it that way, but there you go.
That's phenomenal. I hadn't seen the details. I just knew that there had been some power issues starting it out, but the comeback upset that
pink
what'd
balloon.
You say?
A pink balloon.
Yeah. The comeback upset that almost didn't happen at least as scheduled because of a sorority balloon. What a
True story.
In Malone Stadium. Paul, thank you so much. And maybe if you'd be interested, check back in a little bit as the season goes on, and we'll see how the Warhawks are doing.
Sure, anytime.
Good deal. Again, Paul Letlow, ULMWarhawks.com, columnist. Watch that nice comeback for the Warhawks on Saturday night against Army for Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser.